Traders, Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com on November the 1st, 2015. In this video we're going to cover the indices which have proceeded higher. It's in week 5 without a pause. S&P up by 0.2% and NASDAQ up by 0.54%. Tick cumulative on the NYSE is cruising higher. The comp shows us a pause. The NYSE and the NASI, breath-wise, look like they're stalling and could turn back down. The most important thing is breadth, no MADs or MDDs, but the New York Stock Exchange advanced decline is showing some divergence. We'll cover that. We made higher highs, but the NYAD is actually moving lower highs. NYSE, the high-low is stalling. CPC's in the mid-range. Neutral for equities. Currencies, US dollars at the top of the range and yen's at the bottom of the range. If those reverse, that could be spelling trouble for equities. Bonds, TLT daily, weekly, moving sideways at the moving averages. Commodities, crude oil is actually doing quite well. Bounce, and it's stable above the 10 EMA and the 50-period moving average. Gold and copper pulled back. Sectors are overbought, which could add a catalyst for a downside move this week. Remember, we're up 5 weeks in a row without a pause. That's pretty unusual. 6 weeks would definitely overdo it. XLU is oversold and turning, so for that no rate hike crowd, XLU utilities, which are dividend intensive, are oversold, turning, and moving higher. That's good for XLU and utilities. And setups, we'll look at some IBD50 stocks through the lens of the 10E Stow MACD setup. In addition to the weekly charts, SPY put in an outside day. We have the 10-period moving average moving higher, and we have the 20-period just below that. If you connect the highs across this level, as I was discussing with the student this morning, we could pull back to the 202, 203 zone and have about a 3% pullback, which would set up a nice move into year end. Now, there's a number of things that we're watching in addition to the daily for that to occur. For example, we're looking at the 60-minute time frame. We closed right on the 30-period moving average on Friday. We have stochastics moving lower, MACD moving lower, and tick cumulative moving lower on this time frame. If we drop down below this level and move back down into this range, into the volume by price reverse Kirby, or this support zone, we would look for a bounce at that point. A pullback to that level, or 3%, would definitely get catalyst behind it, like sectors, as we mentioned previously. We'll go over that. So we're watching what would happen on the spiders on the downside. On the positive side, we could see a move higher, though with the S&P 500 being up for 5 weeks in a row, we find that a little bit unlikely. 6 weeks is definitely pushing it, and something that we would watch for this week. Now, we could move higher into this zone. Surely, we have this volume by price resistance zone overhead, but if you connect the highs across in this area, a pullback to the, highs across this area, a pullback to the 20-30 zone wouldn't be unusual, and still fairly bullish with stochastics in the red zone, MACD peaking, and possibly having a little bit of a negative bias going into the week. Here is the NASDAQ weekly, which obviously did quite well over the last few weeks with earnings on Amazon, Google, Microsoft, gaps up on LinkedIn on Friday, First Solar, Baidu. All of those stocks did quite well. So we're putting in a little bit of a wick these past 2 weeks at the upper Bollinger Band. A move lower would be totally unusual and would actually set up a nice move into year end if that were to occur this week. We'll note where stochastics is also in the red zone. MACD is peaking and could see a little bit of a downside move and still be bullish going into year end. We're not looking for a crash here, fellas and ladies. We're just looking at possibilities for a move back for a year-end run going into Christmas time. This is a chart of the number of stocks above their 50-period moving average on the NASDAQ, and this can clearly show you that we're literally in the red zone and nosebleed territory in an area where we've seen inflection points before, just the opposite of what we saw back in late August and late September. So this is another catalyst for a move lower. Here's a different chart, a cleaner chart of the S&P 500 with the S&P number of stocks above the 50-period moving average and a 200-period moving average. You can see both of these are in the red zone and in an area where a pullback wouldn't be highly unlikely. Connect these highs and we're right down to the 2020-2030 zone for a pullback to break out and a move higher into year end. And here, of course, is the Russell 2000, which was down 0.36%, while the other indices had already paused. So this is leading somewhat. We thought it might bounce higher to the 200-period moving average on the daily, but that didn't happen. We've been moving sideways on the weekly. Note the wicks. We've had buyers here along this zone. But if the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ move lower this week, note we're in the red zone on Russell, we could see a move lower on the small caps as well. Note that MACD is still below the zero line on small caps. We're going to make this video a little bit shorter for the weekend. One of the things I want you to pay attention to this week is the New York Stock Exchange advanced decline, which you can see here has put in a divergence. The red line is the ratio, advanced decliners, putting in lower highs, whereas the New York Stock Exchange composite is putting in higher highs. So that divergence is spelling a little trouble, as we pointed out on all of the other charts. Some of the conflicting information we're seeing on the high lows, the number of highs minus new lows. The histogram printed a positive bar on Friday. And so this week and the last week has been pretty positive for the most part. So it's just something that we need to keep an eye on as Bollinger Bands are starting to narrow on the New York Stock Exchange composite. So we're going to post a lot of the indicators in a blog post prior to the open rather than covering all of them in the video this weekend. However, one of the things we do want to point out in addition to the advanced decline divergence, the NASDAQ McClellan Oscillator, NAMO, moving lower. You can see these lower highs, the action on the NDX 100 pausing, the two blue elder sticks, and the summation index, NASI, is starting to turn. We see the same thing on the NYMO for the New York Stock Exchange. Lower highs with the summation index starting to turn as well. Looking at the US dollar for a moment, we pointed out the range that the dollar has been in since May or so. We hit these highs on Wednesday, pulled back. We do have a longer-term trend line that we're coming back to test. If this bounces higher, that means the yen will likely move lower. This would be bullish for equities in this particular scenario. Note slow stochastic is, however, in the red zone, and MACD histogram as well as the signal line as well as MACD are starting to turn somewhat. So we could see this push back into this range. That would be bearish for equities. A breakout would be bullish for equities, and we would see the opposite effect on yen, which more than likely would continue to push higher as it did back in August. I'm not looking for this to happen, but a move back to the top of this range at 84.50 wouldn't be unusual if the dollar did start to see some weakness. Note MACD is moving lower, and slow stochastic had moved up from below 20 and the green zone. So watch the yen, watch the dollar this week if you're bullish or bearish equities conversely, respectively. And of course, looking at commodities priced in US dollars, the crude has been moving sideways for the most part for the past 8 weeks. We're above the 50-period moving average and the 10 EMA. We do have the 20-period just overhead. We tested that twice last week. We are in this larger volume by price bar. If we move above this level up to the 50 level, wouldn't be unusual, and a retest of these range highs around 49.50 up to 50.92. And finishing up with gold and copper, both of them are off the past 2 weeks, and that's mainly due to the strength in the US dollar. Copper looks pretty much the same. Each week we look for catalysts for both bullish or bearish moves. In this case, we're looking at the sectors as usual. Most of them are overbought when you gauge it with stochastic, so you can check that out as well. MACD is crossing over in some of the cases, which is one of the things we pointed out a week or so ago when I said what would get me bearish. And by bearish I mean just a small pullback. 1 to 3% wouldn't be highly unusual this time of year, and then leading into a rally for the Christmas break. So MACD's crossing on all of these charts for the most part, with a few exceptions, as we can see here. And we want to keep an eye on the sectors for performance. Note the candles on the daily charts, and keep an eye on these early in the week to give us an anticipation to show us which direction we might want to anticipate for the week ahead. Okay, so here is the new IBD50 list. We note CBOE is new, I believe, and it looks like Gray Television is back on the list. Solar Winds is back, SWI, and Signature Bank. I'm not sure if that was on last week's list. Let's take a look. Nope. The last week's list, a number of stocks have dropped off, and Gray was added, as well as CBOE and XRS, TL Education Group. So if we rank these by percent change, we can see about half of these are green and half of those are red. We have Facebook earnings coming up on the 4th. We also have LinkedIn, which gapped up on earnings on Friday. This was a nice move, which is a good lead-in for the video we posted this weekend. In a shameless plug for the video series, the strategy video series, we uploaded a new one for the weekend. A number of stocks had gapped up on Friday, LinkedIn, Baidu, among others. So this video will cover that particular strategy. If you just go to the closingprint.com under the premium videos section, that video has been uploaded for those of you who've been asking how we play earnings. This strategy video will give you the heads up. So let's take a look at some of the IBD50. This is Alphabet. Google, as you know, changed its name, gap up 2 Fridays ago, closed lower, and then rallied the rest of the week. Friday we had a little bit of profit taking. AmTrust Financial, remember XLF had a pretty nasty candle on the sector chart, XLF, on Friday. So any of the stocks in this group should be looked at with a little suspicion if you decide to trade some of these. It is holding to the period AMA, and we have this volume by price support level about $1 lower. Stochastics is heading towards the 20 zone, and MACD is positive. Avago moving sideways in a triangle pattern. Bank of Ozarks, reversal candle on Friday. We had a little bit of a shooting, almost a shooting star on Thursday, and price action took that out on Friday. Stochastics has further to go, it looks like, and we see volume. Blackhawk, not interested. CBOE, this is new obviously, comes back to this zone off the upper Bollinger Band. We have volume by price support below. Maybe this sets up a little bit better. It gets down to 20. and turns, and MACD stays positive. CDW sideways. Remember to check earnings on all of these. Calmain weak. Cambrix descending channel. Back to the top of that. Could bounce higher. Note the volume by price support. Stochastics is turning on most of these. Celgene back on the list. Little descending channel here. And stochastic moving lower. MACD positive. A few more days for a pullback, and some of these stocks will probably look better. Citrix is one of the stocks that gapped up last week. Check out the video uploaded on the site this weekend for trading gaps. Note that this ran up from 75 to 76 on the breakout and ran higher by $8 or so into the week. Note the volume. Cognizant, pull back to breakout, possibly bounces here above the 10 EMA. Stochastics moving lower, MACD's positive. Look for a 10 Esto MACD setup. Constellation brands, note the narrow Bollinger Bands. Price moving sideways just below the 10 EMA. Stochastics is oversold. Could turn back up, note the volume. And MACD could turn back up as well. So keep an eye on STX this week. But Dave & Buster's been on the list for a couple of weeks now. Holding above the 50 period. Dicom moving sideways, ascending triangle pattern. Stochastics moving higher, MACD positive. Edwards Life Sciences, this one's been high beta, trying to break out. Maybe it does it this week. Note the volume, check earnings if it has already posted earnings, I'm not sure. Ellie Mae trying to break out, descending pattern here, descending triangle, descending wedge. EPAM, sideways, triangle pattern, lower highs, higher lows, could break out here. Note the narrow Bollinger Band. Stowe is almost oversold. 10 Stowe MACD setup coming up soon. EEFT, new on the list last week, continues to grind higher between the 10 EMA and the upper Bollinger Band. Note the volume 2 weeks ago. Stochastics in the red zone, MACD positive. Facebook earnings on November the 4th. Keep an eye on this one. Could pull back to breakout and then bounce, maybe a gap up for a trade. Global payments, this is one that we covered in the weekend video. The gap and go technique. This one gapped up on the 7th of October and hasn't looked back. Had a nice run from the 120 level up to 139 for 18 to 19 points. If you took it prior to that, we had a blog post talking about this ascending triangle pattern, ascending wedge that broke out to the upside. Stochastics overbought, MACD's positive. Gray Television back on the list again. Nice little move here on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Looking good. Looks like it's going to test this upper recent highs. Gets above this volume by price bar. Could look good going into this week. Stochastics overbought, MACD's positive. Grupo Financial Galicia, GGAL. This is new. Remember what XLF looks like. And keep that in mind going into the week. If this one shows relative strength, it might be a trade. Hawaiian Holdings, flagging out here, nice little pennant pattern. We took this one on the breakout. This was a buy stop, and you also had the opportunity for a little flag here, which we posted, which we sent out on a blog post a few weeks ago. That was a nice run from the 28 level up to the current highs. Inogen, looking weak, down below all the moving averages. Integrated Device Tech, IDTI, a pennant pattern there. Stochastics trying to get oversold, MACD's positive. Intercontinental Exchange, ICE looking weak. MACD's positive, however. LGI Homes, taking out all of this price action here. We got stopped out right here a few weeks ago on this one candle. Had a nice low trade here, descending channel. Broke out to the upside, had a buy stop there at 28, kept running higher to 33.40, had two reversal candles, a spinning top, and look at all the wicks here, signaling a possible change in trend, and we got stopped out as we took out this spinning top low right here at around 31.75. Linux, LII, that's got to be new too. I don't recall seeing that on the list last week. Grinding higher above the 10 EMA and the upper Bollinger Band. Stochastics higher, getting embedded, MACD positive. LinkedIn, talked about that. Manhattan Associates, pennant pattern. Mikey's looking at this one for the week. Watch slow stochastic continues to move lower. Maybe it bounces at 50. MACD's positive. Mentor Graphics, looks like a little breakout here. Descending channel, broke out, moved higher, hugging the 10 period EMA and the upper Bollinger Band, above volume by price. Look for a 10 Stow MACD setup. Would like to see this back down at 50 before it turns back up for a trade on this. Pulls back to the 10 EMA or the 20. Maybe that sets up. NetEase continues to grind higher along with the NASDAQ over the last few weeks. Nike continues to move sideways. We tried to take this a couple of weeks ago and it just continued to move sideways. Stochastics moving higher, MACD's positive. NOAA looks like it's going to break out of this little pennant pattern, little flag consolidation pattern right here. Narrow Bollinger Bands. Note this upper volume by price bar resistance. Stochastics trying to turn and MACD positive. O'Reilly, this one finally broke out. Missed this one last week. Nice gap up. No doubt on earnings. Paycom, sideways. Regeneron. Check this one out along with Biogen and Celgene, also on this list, for a possible setup. If it pulls back to the 10 EMA, this little breakout area here, volume by price support, maybe Stochastics gets down to 0, gets down to 20 and turns, and MACD stays positive. SS&C continues to grind higher. Stochastics turning up. Signature Bank, SBNY. Remember, XLF. And check earnings. Holding the 10 period EMA, buyers stepped in there. Stochastics still near the red zone. MACD's positive. Last group, Signet Jewelers, talked about this one a couple of weeks ago. The whole Christmas thing. A breakout above this level 3 weeks ago, and the stock just continues to move higher. Stochastics is now in the red zone. MACD's positive. Smith O, one we traded before, breakout last week. Didn't trade it this time. SolarWinds, gap up, moving sideways. Starbucks, I think already reported earnings. It did actually report on the 29th. It missed by a penny, but it didn't pull that much, so keep an eye on Starbucks moving sideways. If this doesn't break down, that could be a good sign going into Christmas time. Stochastics getting near 50. Note the volume on Friday. That's quite interesting. We had a gap up, moved lower on earnings, but held above the close here on Thursday, all of this week actually, and this breakout level. Looking kind of interesting on one of my favorite stocks, Starbucks. This one's new, TAL as we mentioned, XRS, Stochastics overbought, MACD positive. Tesoro, looks like this could break out, ascending triangle pattern. Stochastics overbought, MACD positive. Watch for earnings. Tesoro reported on the 28th and had a nice beat there, 7%. Surprise, they were looking for 605, got 648. Ulta moving higher, looking like it wants to break out. Stochastics is overbought, and it doesn't report until December the 3rd, so we got room to run on Ulta. Just keep that in mind. Nice little move. Spinning top on Friday outside the upper Bollinger Bands. Overbought here. MACD is positive. Universal Insurance, financial property casualty insurance. Big move down on Friday, as we saw with some of the other financials. Visa, outside day there after a hanging man on Thursday. Big candle on Wednesday. So financials aren't doing that hot right now. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so that's going to do it for me. This is Cousin Vinny from theclosingprint.com, where we try to help you trade like a pro, learn everything you need to know to become a successful trader. We have a lot of material for you to check out. Just go to the blog, which is right here. You can also just enter in theclosingprint.com/CV_blog. You have to use caps here. It's case sensitive. It's a Linux server. We have premium services, premium videos. The book that I released in August is here, as well as the premium videos. So I hope this all helps for the week ahead. Take care, and we'll see you on the stream on Monday.